The New York Times reports the Trump White House looking into a potential $100 billion tax cut that would disproportionately benefit the wealthy as they would take an axe to capital gains taxes. Former Fed Vice Chair, Princeton University Professor Alan Blinder joins us today as the Fed does in fact begin that two-day meeting. So a lot to talk about, Alan. Good to have you back.
Nice to be here. Thanks.
See, it feels like the dynamic of this meeting may not be a hike since it's not expected, but they are redeeming $28 billion in debt. Jamie Dimon made some comments about sort of the unknown effects of QT. We've never had QE. We don't know what the unwind will feel like. Do you think it's going to be significant or not?
Look, the unwind's been going on for a while, and it's been going at a very slow pace. Actually, if you go back to when they first announced it, I was sort of amazed how slowly they said they would start, and of course they did start very slowly. The market's swallowing this with ease. It's completely forecastable, gradual. It's the kind of things that markets eat for breakfast every day.
Fitch last week, they wrote that they're talking about all four major central banks, but they say that net asset purchases by the four majors will likely turn negative next year. The impact, quote, likely to be significant despite it being widely anticipated. Do you think the fact that we've been waiting for it for so long will make it easier to absorb?
I think so. I think the notion that it's going to have a large effect is predicated on what I think is a false belief that there'll be some big surprises down the road. Now, when I say that, by definition, we don't anticipate the big surprises. So as I look out to the future of these central banks, I don't see any big surprises. I could be wrong, and if there is a big surprise, then the markets will have a big reaction.
So as Steve's survey, Fed survey, suggested, most investors think it's inappropriate to have the president commenting on monetary policy. Do you think it matters for investors or for Fed policy that he weighed in so vociferously, saying he doesn't like the interest rate hikes or the strong dollar?
I think so far it matters a little. If he keeps it up, it could matter a lot. As you said in the lead-in, nobody's expecting a rate hike today. That certainly includes me. We're not going to have a rate hike tomorrow. I mean, we almost certainly will have one in September. That'll be in pretty close proximity to the election. And given President Trump's inability to hold his tongue, or rather his finger from the keyboard, we may get a more vociferous tweet or something from him. And I think the more frequently and the more loudly he says things like that, the more the markets will get upset about it.
When you say matter, do you mean in the sense that the market would react, or that Powell or the committee's viewpoint would be altered somehow?
I think much more that the market will react. I think the notion that this would affect the FOMC's decision, it's not impossible, but at this point it's fanciful. It would have to get much worse. The FOMC would have to feel that its independence is being sorely threatened and that it needs to demonstrate its independence by showing it will do what President Trump wants it not to do. I think we're a long, long way from that.
Alan, love to have you weigh in on this plan, at least floated from Treasury, that would seemingly adjust the cost basis for a capital gain to account for inflation. Good idea, bad idea? What do you think?
I think it's a good idea turned into a horrible idea. Let me explain. It makes sense to index the capital gains and interest and depreciation and some other things for inflation. If you only do it to the capital gain and don't do it, say, to interest payments, you're opening the door to titanic abusive tax shelters. It's a horrible idea. Secondly, you should make this revenue neutral and distributionally neutral. It's been noted this is going to cost $100 billion or more over a decade. That should be made up with something else. It's been noted that almost all the benefits go to upper income people. So that suggests to me the something else that makes up the $100 billion or so of lost revenue should be targeted at the people that could afford it, not what the Republicans often like to do, target at the people that can't afford it.
Nobody's talking about deficit neutral here.
Pardon me?
Yeah, nobody's talking about deficit neutral. We're talking about the return of the $1 trillion deficit and a further potential tax cut. Economists like you are warning about it, but it doesn't look like the market is worried about the sky-high debt or anything else. When does that become a problem?
It's a really good question. When does it become a problem? The markets, I think, are still deliriously happy that they're paying lower taxes. And the question is, when will that start dissipating amidst irresponsible tax policy, irresponsible deficit policy, irresponsible talk about the Fed, and you might add 100 other things outside the economic realm. So far, I think they're just in dreamland about the wonders of lower taxes.
That sort of brings us to the reports of this study that Treasury ostensibly is doing about capital gains. I assume, I guess I can sort of guess your answer as to the value of that proposition.
Yeah, and I left one thing out in my answer to the previous question. It's almost certainly unconstitutional. The Constitution gives the right to make tax laws to the Congress, not to the U.S. Treasury. I read in the newspapers that Secretary Mnuchin is sort of mulling over whether they have the authority. I can give him the answer. They don't.
Well, that doesn't mean they're not going to try to test it.
That's correct.
And that there won't be a market response immediately upon implementation, even if it were to be overturned.
You know, as I was saying before, the market seems so happy about having tax cuts. I think they will react with some joy, forgetting about the Constitution, if Secretary Mnuchin says we're going to do this on our own authority. Then I would expect to get overturned in the court, but I'm not a lawyer.
I mean, we saw why the market's happy about the tax cuts. 4.1% economic growth is nothing to sneeze at. How long does that stimulative impact of lower taxes last?
I think it lasts a while. I don't think you would think of it as a one-quarter aberration. The second quarter looks pretty strong right now. It's early, very, very early days. But it looks, the following quarter, the third, looks pretty strong right now. Not 4% probably, but a 3% quarter would be pretty good performance at this stage of the cycle. And with potential GDP probably growing less than 2% per annum. So I think you expect some juice from the tax cut to last, at least a year and probably more than that.